Well, I'm Sheila Toonan. I'm Chair of School Libraries Group Scotland, and I'm delighted to welcome you to get a jump on next session with Scottish Book Trust. Before I introduce our speakers, just got a couple of housekeeping items. If you can mute your audio, that would be great. Video, whatever suits you, you can have it on or off. Captions are enabled and you can toggle these on or off, and the session will be recorded and will be available on the SILIPS website soon. So I'm really excited to welcome and introduce Rachel Leyburn and Catherine Wilson-Gary from Scottish Book Trust. They're going to talk about their initiatives and share how we can use these in school. There'll be a discussion element during the session and you're invited to participate in that via the chat function. Rachel and Catherine are really happy to answer any questions as they go, and they'll do their best to answer them as and when they crop up. If not, they'll answer them at the end. There will be a breakout room discussion for you after the Reading Schools introduction to encourage us all to start thinking about what we'd like to include in our action plans or to reflect on the work we've done already this year. There'll be time at the end of the session for anyone to add suggestions or thoughts onto the Jamboard, and Rachel and Catherine will pop the link for this into the chat to give everyone access, and you should be able to add any notes. After the event, there'll be an evaluation survey, and we'd really appreciate it if you could complete that, please. And finally, my colleague Tanya on the School Libraries Group Scotland committee will say thank you and close the event at 6 o'clock. So now over to Rachel and Catherine. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I'm going to start the presentation today, and then Rachel will be doing a little bit after. So Rachel, could we go to the next slide, please? Perfect, thank you very much. So yeah, this is an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to be taking you through an introduction to our Reading Schools accreditation programme, and then we're going to have a breakout room after that, and then we're going to talk a bit about making the most of author visits and future plans for the Scottish Teenage Book Prize, and we'll also be getting some key dates in your diary. Can I go next slide, Rachel? So yeah, it's my pleasure to talk to you a little bit about Reading Schools today. And Reading Schools is our accreditation framework that recognises and rewards schools for building and sustaining a whole school reading culture in their setting. If I could go next slide. Yeah, I've just said that, so slide after that. So yeah, Reading Schools offers an accreditation for every school. It has just this week opened to every school in Scotland. It also provides a structure for all of your reading initiatives and activities, and the framework of it is mapped onto How Good Is Our School For, which supports school improvement and inspections. There's also an offer in terms of online. We offer professional development and leadership opportunities that include CLPL sessions, but also kind of a wide suite of resources on the Reading School website. Through taking part, it's a great way to develop learner voice, leadership and confidence. And there's also opportunities for collaboration, both with within your school, so across different classes, but also across other schools, and also engaging families and the wider community. And taking part in Reading Schools also means you get support from us at the Scottish Book Trust. If I can move on to the next slide. So yeah, how Reading Schools works. There's 3 levels to Reading Schools, and the best way to find out what level you are is there is a quiz which we will share towards the end. My colleague Liam likes to talk about the 3 levels kind of through the metaphor of the hokey cokey. So there's core, silver and gold, core being in, silver being out, and then gold being shake all about. So what that translates to is that core is about establishing reading routines in your school environment and really making a foundation of reading for pleasure. Silver is about broadening what you've been doing, so taking your in, expanding it a little bit out, and then gold is shaking all about. That means sharing your enthusiasm and expertise within your community, so including a lot of partnerships, and those can take a lot of different forms. So yeah, broadly speaking, core is kind of focusing on creating that foundation within, silver is about broadening it a little bit, and then gold is expanding it outwards beyond the school. if we could move on to the next slide. Yeah, so the way to use Reading Schools is through our framework, which you can access on our website. As I mentioned earlier, that framework's modeled on How Good Is Our School For? And there's several different key areas. So for example, you might be able to see on this, but we'll get you looking at it a little bit later. Those include things like staff development, engaging with authors, raising the profile of reading with families. And for each area, there is a suggestion of a number of activities your school can undertake, all of these with the goal of helping embed reading for pleasure in your school. However, when you're going through the framework, it's really important to know that even though there are some suggestions for ideas of activities that you could undertake, you're also welcome to add in your own ideas and initiatives too. There's different requirements for each key area, depending on whether you are doing core, silver, or gold. You can see here on the left the relevant key areas for the core level, and on the right you can see the actions. So the key areas are leadership of learning, leadership of change, management of resources, and you can see that management of resources has been expanded in the right hand picture and has been expanded into one of the key areas, which is access to high quality books. And under that there's what we would require as evidence, and there's also some examples of how to deliver that in your school. If I can move on to the next slide, we'll be able to see a more detailed kind of outline of how the framework works. So this, for example, this is one of the key areas, which is staff knowledge of contemporary children's literature. Essentially, as part of Reading Schools, we want to see that staff are developing their knowledge around reading for pleasure and contemporary children's books. So you can see the far left for our core reading school, it says schools should make staff aware of contemporary children's literature by completing one of the mandatory actions, which is making staff aware of contemporary children's literature through signposting new book lists. In the middle, you can see that there's the silver has more actions. So for example, inviting your local librarian to talk to staff, giving contemporary children's books to each staff member, having a book borrow box and staff. And then for gold, you can see it's developed even further. For example, a staff book club, physical areas for discussion, online spaces for discussion, taking part in our Scottish Book Trust book discovery sessions, or taking part in our local authority book clubs. So you can see that it kind of, the framework is building at each level. So you're kind of developing your delivery at each different level of Reading Schools. But it's also important to note that, for example, most of these suggested activities will have an accompanying resource on the Reading School website. So for example, we're currently working on a resource about how to run a staff book club. The Scottish Book Trust book discovery sessions are obviously a CLPL opportunity that your staff can take part in. So yeah, this is a more detailed example, but what is key to remember is we do have this quiz that will help you figure out which level you're at. So you don't need to kind of worry too much about trying to understand core, silver and gold all at once. It'll more be about figuring out which level you're at and then focusing on that level. And we'll go into this a little bit in more depth, but it's not necessary to do core and then silver and then gold. If you think that your school is more at the level of silver or gold, that's totally fine. You can go for that straight away. If we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, so just to kind of cover the different language that we use. So the framework, which I've just gone over, is the different key areas that you would need to be delivering to achieve each level of accreditation. The two kind of steps in terms of working with Scottish Book Trust that are important is, the first is your action plan. So this is what you would submit to Scottish Book Trust, where you would select different activities, or you can add your own. basically to plan each different area of the framework. So for example, the one that we looked at earlier, with staff knowledge of contemporary literature, you would basically tell us what you planned to do to make staff aware of contemporary children's literature. But you would do that kind of for each area of the framework. The evidence plan is the plan you submit where you, once you have completed that, so that is the evidence of what you've done, and the evidence is quite clearly stated what we're looking for at each level. And the other thing that I just wanted to point out was there may be a gap of time between putting together your action plan of what you're wanting to do and your evidence plan. It's completely fine if your plans change or they're adapted. I think reading schools is much more of a journey. It's not just kind of a tick box exercise. We totally appreciate that there's a narrative and that things may work or may not work and you have to try again. I think we've all had evidence of that with kind of adapting our plans with COVID for the last year. So just to say, the action plan is to give us a rough idea of what you want to do in your priorities. In your evidence plan, if there are some changes, that's okay. We just kind of want to hear about why and what you have developed instead. So yeah, if I could move on to the next slide. So yeah, this is a best practice example we thought we would share specifically from the angle of libraries. And this ties back into the framework I was showing you about staff knowledge of contemporary literature. So in a submission from St Ninian's High School, we heard about how they started a podcast that was called Book Blethers, and it was hosted by an English teacher and a librarian. It had several kind of regular segments that included sharing book recommendations for listeners, and they also interviewed different staff members about what books they enjoyed and their different reading habits. We wanted to share this because we thought it was a really interesting way for learners to connect with the library and the librarian throughout their school life, and have regular reminders of what books were in stock. And something else that they did was they actually, any books that were recommended on the podcast, they had displays of them throughout the school. So children could kind of constantly be looking at them and seeing them, and the librarians could kind of share what was in stock or what had newly been added to the library. So in terms of the Reading Schools framework, it does contribute a lot to the different sections. And whilst they submitted this under staff knowledge of contemporary literature, because the staff were listening to this podcast and getting new book recommendations and reading books from the library, I just thought it was worth pointing out that one piece of delivery can achieve a lot of different goals at the same time. So it also was there for visible staff role modeling, which is about demonstrating reading to learners in the school, but also the displays throughout the school tie into school environment. So this school also took part in the First Minister's Reading Challenge, and they're currently a silver reading school. And something else that they did that's worth mentioning is they also ran an author event in partnership with their PE department and health and well-being too. So yeah, there's lots of, they did lots of fantastic delivery, but we wanted to kind of talk about this specifically because we thought this was a good example of something that you could do to kind of platform your library, and it shows how librarians can also be getting involved. I also really, I've put a quote up here that I really enjoyed, which was how Reading Schools is really about a whole school approach. So it's not just about being led by the English department at the library. The guests on this book podcast were from across different departments, and it kind of shows that regardless of what subject is being taught, their teachers are reading, and that also they're reading a very wide variety of fiction, non-fiction, comics and audiobooks. I haven't managed to listen to all of it, but they had an interview with one of their physics teachers who talks about how he reads books in a kind of non-linear fashion by like dipping in and out of multiple different books at the same time, which is really interesting, just hearing how someone who's kind of very much in that world of science reads books in a very different way. so yeah, this is a really great example of how reading schools really is about the whole school and not just kind of one or two really passionate individuals. So yeah, that's my kind of whistle-stop tour of reading schools so far. What we thought we would do now, I'm just going to pop the Jamboard link into the chat, and what we would do, what we'd like you guys to do, it's quite a basic description here, but it does go into a bit more depth on the Jamboard. We're going to put you into groups, and we want you to kind of start having a think about these different, this is 5 examples from the framework. And we wanted you to kind of have a think and a discussion about how you think you could deliver some of these areas, specifically where you're working. I have put some examples in. So for example, you'll see if you're in group 2, interdisciplinary book projects, I think the example I've put in is like if you were reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you could create chocolate bars in home economics or enterprise class. But feel free to bounce off of those, feel free to bring up stuff that you might already be doing, or make it a bit more specific and tailored to your own kind of library or setting. I think we just really want you to take this opportunity to get a little bit of inspiration so that once you're out in the world with the framework, you maybe already have some ideas. So yeah, that's the Jamboard link in the chat. Let me know if anyone's having any difficulty with that. Do feel free to say, and I'm happy to take you through it. But I think we're ready for breakout rooms to be opened, if that's clear.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Catherine. The breakout rooms are opening now, everyone, and you should have at least one SLG Scotland member in your group, so they will steer you right. There's so much inspiring stuff to share there. I've left Catherine. Rachel, do you want to maybe nip in and out of the room and see how people are going? Or
Sure.
Fantastic. That's everybody joining the rooms, and we will pause the recording and then we'll be back here soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing that. I got to move through some of the rooms and there was just really good chat in all of them. Before we move on, I'm just wondering if folk would mind sharing what they spoke about, or if there's any ideas that they didn't get a chance to share, just so that everyone gets kind of a little bit of an insight into all the different ideas that have been shared. So if someone from group 1 wouldn't mind unmuting themselves and just tell us a little bit about what they did.
Were we group 1? I don't remember, I'm afraid.
I think you were, yeah.
Yeah, I see,
knowledge
okay.
of contemporary literature.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, as Graham said in the chat, we didn't really get very far because we were chatting too much, I'm afraid. We didn't move on. But yeah, Graham had a great idea about popping books and staff rooms with little blurbs in each of the books for borrowing and reading over the summer. We also had an idea about a secret book group for staff with secret reviews from staff. Now, I'm not sure if these were anonymised reviews. I guess they would have been if it's secret. And also someone was talking, in fact, Graham, I think this was you as well, talking about what's worked for your student book groups, also works for staff book groups, is having cakes, cuppas and books, and with no pressure for everyone to read the same book, but for staff to come along with a different selection of books that they have been reading or are currently reading, and everyone chatting about them. And I think also someone's talking about having a school Padlet for sharing what they read. Yeah, I think that's as far as we got. Yeah.
That's really fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for bravely volunteering as well. Yeah. So yeah, I really like the idea of, and this is something I think we've spoken a little bit about book trust as well, is that yeah, if you're running a staff book group, you don't all have to read the same book. It can kind of take a slightly different form. So sometimes what's quite good is like every month reading
It's nothing new.
Reading completely different books, because then you can kind of share and pull the knowledge. Do you have a volunteer from group 2 who was talking about interdisciplinary book projects?
I can volunteer for group 2. We had a really interesting chat, and we started by talking about how important it is to have a sympathetic member of staff or members of staff who are on your side, because a lot of it is about talking to people and to get the buy-in from other departments. So in terms of ideas, we had a few. We kind of talked about Harry Potter, because we know that's sort of like a perennial favourite, and that's a good one that you can get buy-in for, you know, the home economics department, and, you know, you could have history and all the different subjects because it's set at school. We also thought that, like, more up to date, the trend for murder mysteries, so things like One of Us is Lying, for example, could be a really good theme or a book to tie in doing forensics in science, having a trial in English, or doing digital escape rooms in computing. So although I'm not running this in my school, our whole school is doing a CSI day tomorrow. So I thought it would be quite fairly simple, hopefully, to maybe tailor that to a book theme. And then we talked as well about World War I and World War II, because you could get a lot of tie-in doing creative writing in English, doing research in history, for example, using the art department. And then also the environment would be, again, another topic that would lend itself to an interdisciplinary book project. So that was all we got just in the time that we had. But I suppose maybe once you start thinking, there would probably be lots of different books and topics that you could use.
Yeah, this is really really fantastic, and I enjoyed the bit of the chat I heard about One of Us is Lying just flies off the shelves. I read it a while back. It's very good, but yeah, it's incredibly popular. Every time I go to my local Tesco, they seem to like be restocking it, and then just I think it's just everyone's reading it. Can I get a volunteer from group 3? This was the group talking about learner social networks.
Yep, a lot of the folks in our group are not signed up yet, and are really looking for ideas and inspiration. That's why they come today. But we also had a couple of folks who are have submitted or have moved to a school where they're already silver, and it's looking ahead to what to do next. Best piece of advice I thought was, we don't appreciate what it is that we do on a daily basis, and so much of what we're already doing ties in so well with reading schools, and also that I've lost my train of thought, sorry. So I'll just move on and say that make sure you get lots of things on Twitter, lots of photographs, because it will serve you well in the long run when you're trying to kind of gather your information together. Use of Teams for senior pupils, because otherwise they're quite difficult to get in touch with. And lots of clubs happening in the library and other clubs that had been tied in.
Thank you for that. I think that's a really good point, Jennifer, in that I think a lot of reading schools, it's not designed to be as a kind of, you know, day one, start absolutely from scratch. Like, a lot of this you might go through and you might realize you're doing quite a lot of it already. I know that someone in your group was chatting a lot about how they already run so many clubs out of the library because it's a community space. So these are all things that you can be pulling on. It's really not designed to be like a fresh new approach. And we, you know, because part of it is recognizing that you guys are already doing such fantastic work. So yeah, thank you for that. And also the advice of using something like Twitter, or just really storing your photos as you go along, will help you so much, because it means that you don't get to the end of the year and go like, oh, I need a photo for this. Can I have a volunteer from group 4? This was opportunities for learners to respond to what they're reading.
Hi, I was in group 4 and we took a wee while to get going, actually. We weren't quite sure, but we got there. One of the things we spoke about were like postcards for the pupils to fill in postcards. So a couple of us have done that, and talking about reading reflections, how how they got on in S1 and S2, so did a kind of a review of their reading. And they could do that by writing or drawing, and then they're also on those reading reflections talk about how they're going to continue the reading journey into S3. Talked about digital reading passports on Teams and how they can be shared on Teams so that other pupils can see and also comment on recommendations, and that can get posted weekly on Teams. A book talk programme where the pupils are encouraged to contribute to the book talks and the discussions with librarian and member of staff, teaching member of staff, and things like pupil book clubs and initiatives and events like World Book Day and Book Week Scotland, and all the events and activities that happen in these big events, and that there's opportunities for pupils to contribute and talk about what they're reading with staff. And also with parents, we talked about, we do that, so share with parents. It's something to perhaps think about. So that was us.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's I really like that in terms of tying in your kind of engagement with families and across the school. I think paired reading is a really excellent idea. Can I have a volunteer from our last group 5? This was raising profile of reading with families.
Yeah, we spoke about using all the methods that your school uses to contact parents, to keep them informed about the importance of reading great children's books, all that sort of thing. So newsletters, websites, emails, social media, using them all to promote the library and reading. Being open on parents' nights and open evenings, having the library open and welcoming, having the book displays up. Somebody suggested doing small book talks to parents when they're visiting the school. There was talk about evening story time sessions, because particularly for those with additional support needs, inviting parents and pupils in to have some story time sessions. Summer reading challenges, wild reading photos. So take your photos reading during your summer holidays of you and your family, bring them into school for a display after the summer. Getting pupils to recommend favourite books. I'm doing a newsletter for parents. These are the books that your children would recommend that you read. So all sorts of really good ideas were coming out there.
Thank you for that. I think it was a submission for First Minister's Reading Challenge, so not reading schools, but not this year, but last year, I read about a school that they just put the paperwork for signing up for a library card in every child's bag to take home with them. And it was something like 70% of the children they did that with signed up for the library. So, sorry, Jennifer.
Yeah, so it's just a couple of comments in the chat about not having a budget for books. So that a lot of things that are being mentioned, if you don't actually have any books, there's obviously a difficulty there.
Yeah, absolutely. So something I will say that we are working on at Scottish Book Trust, and Rachel might speak to this a little bit more, is there is some funding available, but also we are working on a resource about auditing your library and your current stock. Rachel, you might want to tag in and talk a little bit more. I can just see you looking like meerkatting up.
yeah, it's like I've just meerkatted. Yeah, as Catherine says, that we are very, very aware of this, and we don't want to be kind of saying, oh, you can do all of these amazing things, you need to buy more books or anything like that, because we absolutely understand the situation that so many have. But one of the things that is quite exciting about reading schools is that following from August, as part of the kind of launch of the programme, there will be a fund for books that you can apply for when you register for reading school. So it'll be, I don't know exactly what it's going to be called yet, but it's going to be all about getting money for books, for spaces for books as well, because that's something we know with primary schools, for instance, they don't even have a space for books or a library or anything. And they say, well, how are we supposed to create a reading environment if we don't have, a library? So yeah, that's going to be something that's going to be available as a kind of response to everyone that's been involved in reading schools up till now, because yeah, we'd realised that so many people don't have big budgets for books or budgets for reading spaces. So hopefully that'll help with that, but that will be available in the new school year to apply for. And there's no information about it yet, so this is a sneak peek exclusive for you today. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that just so that yeah, you're not going away today thinking, oh, I'd love to do all of this, but actually I can't because I don't have budget. But that'll be coming. So hopefully that'll help on the way a little bit.
Okay, sorry, Catherine, can I also say that also in the chat, somebody's added that for families, try working with the transition teachers for your cluster, because hers or his most certainly wants to target parents.
Thank you so much for that. Thanks, Rachel, for sharing that. And yeah, we can share more information about that, as we said, like in the new school year. And yeah, thank you for folk talking about stuff like that in the chat. I'm just going to wrap up the little reading schools section of the presentation today. And so hopefully the next bits and pieces we'll share, you'll be able to see how they could fit as part of our reading schools action and evidence plan. So yeah, your next steps are to go to the Reading Schools website, have a look at the framework yourself and start having a think about what you are already doing in your school, in your library, what you could be doing next. As I mentioned, there's a level quiz, so take that and it will give you a good sense of what you should be aiming for. Add doing the Reading Schools accreditation to your school improvement plan, and sign up for, on the Reading Schools website, you'll be able to see the CLPL sessions that are more specifically targeted to different areas of the Reading Schools framework. And yeah, dive in. We fully encourage you just to go for it. So hopefully, and what we can do as well is we can send out that Jamboard as a PDF. So hopefully you can look at some of the ideas that you've come up with today, and hopefully you could maybe use that as some inspiration for your action plan. I'm going to pass over to Rachel now, who's going to talk a little bit about author events.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Catherine said, we're just going to have a little bit of a quick chat about how to make the most of author events, because we know that was something that we're keen to chat about today. So this obviously all links in with Reading Schools. You'll know this already. You might be familiar with our author events with Scottish Book Trust already, but we'll give you an overview of kind of all of them just to make sure, but also how to maximise the impact of an author event as well. So we've seen schools utilising both in-person and virtual author events, and this is a little bit similar to how we mentioned with St Ninian's High, doing that PE collaborative health and wellbeing author event. So we'll talk about some of the ways that you can do that and some examples. So first of all, in terms of thinking about author events alongside Reading Schools and the framework, this links really, really nicely in with 1.2, which is the leadership of learning. There's a variety of different author events opportunities across our programmes. Again, you probably know of these already, but just to mention them and some key dates that are coming up, which might be of interest to you. Again, these are all still have not been announced yet, so you're getting a sneak peek preview of the events that are going to be coming out in the new school year. So first of all, we've got the Scottish Friendly Children's Book Tour. Some of you might have had those events before. It's when our team go out into schools and take an author with them, and they go to certain local authorities and do events across a whole week. So coming up in the new term that's been confirmed is Brian Conahan, who did an Authors Live with us recently on his latest book. And in October, he's going to be going on tour to Dundee, Edinburgh and Fife. So if you're in any of those local authorities, keep a wee eye out for that. And Brian will be coming out on tour. These are always free to attend, I should say that. You can the opportunity to get books as part of that too. So it's a really nice opportunity. So Brian's is the only secondary one confirmed as of yet, but hopefully they're thinking about having another secondary event in January. So more of that to come. For Authors Live, I'm sure a lot of you have watched Authors Live before. This is the one we run in partnership with the BBC in Glasgow. So very excitingly, I'm very excited about this, can you tell? We've got Phil Errol, who's going to be doing an event for Authors Live in October. So that'll be before Book Week Scotland. Obviously, I'm sure you're aware of his, Carnegie shortlisted titles and things that he has at the moment, When the Sky Falls, and the newest titles that he's had come out. So that'll be a secondary focused event with Phil Errol for Authors Live. And Keith Gray is also going to be doing an event for us in November as well, which is, I believe, going to be on his latest title, The Climbers, which is published by Barrington Stoke, but he'll probably talk about some of his other titles too. So again, 2 teen-focused events, which will hopefully cover quite a lot of different topics and things that you might be able to tie in with. Arts Alive as well, that'll be running again in the new school year. You might have heard of it. It's been kind of running in the background for the last year. but it's run in collaboration with the national companies, so that's Scottish Opera, National Theatre, Scottish Ballet, all of those companies. And applications for that open in September, where you get a practitioner to come into the school from one of the national companies. So there's a really wonderful event with Scottish Ballet that was all about being yourself and identity and LGBT rights and things like that. It was a really, really lovely example, really great case study that they did. And it was all done kind of performatively through ballet, exploring their identities. So if that's something, you know, you've been thinking, oh, I'd really like to work closely more with like the art department or the drama department in the new school year, Arts Alive is perfect for that, because it just ties in all of those different expressive arts areas while also promoting books and a love of reading. But today we're going to focus a bit more specifically on live literature, which I'm sure you're all aware of. It brings reading, writing to communities by funding author events, including live visits, online workshops, and other remote sessions too. Each year, live literature supports author events that reach over 20,000 people in communities across Scotland. And as part of the wider programme, we also fully fund a number of school residencies, which we'll talk a little bit about. We've got a couple of examples here to show you. So live literature, if you've not heard of it before, if you've not applied for it before, it's an opportunity to have a one-off event in your school with a practitioner, or you can apply for a residency. And residencies are a bit more in-depth. They involve 10 sessions over the course of the school year with one practitioner. So if you wanted to do something really focused with an author, then a residency might be a really good opportunity for that. If you're thinking about applying as well, don't worry about having all the details figured out. I don't know how many times you can say this in terms of a funding application, because I think so often you think, oh, I need to know exactly what I want to do and have it all planned out and know how much when I'm going to spend the money. With live literature, you don't need to do that. You don't need to have like a very specific idea of what you want to do. And in some cases, actually, we prefer it, that you didn't have like a specific idea, and instead think about what would work in the context of your setting. So is there a gap that needs to be filled? Are you focusing on something in particular, such as transitions, some people were mentioning earlier? Link it back to what you're doing as a school, or what you'd like to focus on in the new school year, and the young people that you work with. So even if you don't know specifically what it is you'd like to do or what author you'd like to work with, if you've got a particular thing in mind, or working with the young people that might be particularly good for the young people for the new term, then that's enough to go on. And we can also support you with choosing a practitioner as well. I think sometimes people feel pressure to know which practitioner they'd like to approach for the event when they're applying. You don't need to know that right away. We can also help give guidance on who might be most suitable. If you've got a particular theme in mind, we can kind of give you suggestions too. So one idea that might be worth considering is having a live event in your school library space. Some of you might have done this before, but you know, some people are talking about having parents in and things. That might be a really nice thing to collaborate on with a live literature event. It could also be a way of kicking off the new term, settling new S1s, or ignite some engagement with the library space if you struggle to regain that footfall since they were closed due to the pandemic. We know a lot of school libraries have struggled with that. And again, themed activities based on the young people that you're working with, and using collaboration across departments, as we've touched on already. If there's a way that you could maybe work with you know, the art department or history department, or, you know, there's lots of ways to tie in across the curriculum, and that's a really great way of maximising the impact too. Also, have a wee think about what you want to do before and after the event as well. So working with the pupils on activities in the run-up to the event means that they're more likely to get more out of the visit. We know that we were just at Prestwick Academy last week. No, Graham is here today, but we know that they did a really amazing transition project for S1s using A Kind of Spark by Elle McNichol. And then they invited the author in for a visit after having those activities with the primary sevens in the run up to them starting secondary school. So that just creates that bit more impact. If you're thinking about having an event, actually have a wee think about, oh, what could I do before and after? We've also seen lovely workshops with, you know, using zines and things with secondary schools where they're exploring like LGBT rights and things. And then afterwards, they do some follow-up activities across the curriculum, which is quite nice as well, because then it shows the impact following on from the author event too. So these are the kind of things just to think about when you're wanting to maximise the impact of an event. And also consider running a session with staff. This is not something we see very often, but we're always really, really keen to see, is actually having an author come in and talk to the staff team as part of your professional learning programme. You just get some inspiration for creative writing or some cross-curricular activities, or just seeing yourselves as writers as well. See it as an opportunity for you to get some development time and some opportunity for your professional learning too. There's lots of different ways authors can do that for you too. So an example of the types of sessions that make a big impact that we've kind of seen recently. This was one with Nadine Aisha Jassat, and this was arranged as part of a research project being led by the University of Glasgow. It's all about raising the profile of authors of colour in the classroom. So there's some articles about that on our website if you'd like to learn more. So when it was planned with the school, this residency, they wanted to work towards an anthology of pupils' own writing. So it was very much about reflecting on their experiences, and it's a very diverse pupil role in the school, so they wanted to make sure that they were able to kind of explore their identity through writing. And Nadine obviously was a perfect fit for this. She was given 2 Jackie Kay poems that the classes had been studying as a starting point, and she'd picked up on some of these themes to help the pupils develop their own voices as part of their writing. The poems were My Grandmother's Houses and Keeping Orchids. So the topics would be home, identity, belonging, those kind of things. So Nadine actually chose to do some spine poetry with the pupils because it opens up what poetry can be. I know sometimes when we say poetry to young people, you kind of see their face, it kind of glazes over like, oh no, not poetry. But actually spine poetry is a really, really accessible and inclusive way of getting them to explore poetry, but also kind of exploring creative writing as well. And it's also quite active too, so it meant that the pupils could kind of, I know I'm saying this to librarians, it's like going to mess up all the stock in the organisation, but it's quite a good way of them kind of going and looking at what books they'd like to get and how they'd like to make the spine poem, how those poems stack together and how that is structured. But it also meant that the pupils got to know Nadine, and they got to know the librarian really well, and so worked really well as an introduction too. So if you're thinking about, even if you didn't want to have an author in, you could do spine poetry as an activity. As you can see there, that's Nadine with her spine poem as you go down the titles. I won't read the whole quote that this was Nadine that put this quote in as part of the recipe. I won't read it all, but it just kind of shows you what the process of how the event took place. And she just said, that even the last bit was doing Our Voice is group poem. So, they all did their individual spine poems and then they all came together at the end to do a group poem as well. And that just to showcase their voices, which I think is a really, really nice way of doing that. So this was a really lovely example that hopefully can give you some inspiration. And this is another example from Elgin High in Murray. This is actually based on our additional support needs residency opportunities as well. So this was done in collaboration with the Support for Learning department. This was run by the Learning Resource Coordinator, Elgin High. And they wanted to focus on involving the ASN department in more of the mainstream school activities, especially after COVID. And they'd really seen the impact of the pandemic with the departments being a little less integrated, and saw this opportunity to address that. So what they'd done was they worked with Carol Scorer, who is a storyteller, and they'd done some virtual visits with her previously, and they really wanted to work with her again. So again, if you've done events with other authors in the past and you think actually it'd be really good to get them back in and do something else, then don't worry, like that's great actually, and it's really good for us to see that follow on. If you've done an event with someone before, you thought actually we want to go in a bit more detail, we'd like to do a residency with them, that's always really good to see. So they used words and actions to describe the sea and the coast, obviously being in Murray. It was very relevant to the school children's experiences. And they involved instruments and physical ways of expressing themselves. Obviously, for these young people, it was more of an inclusive way of them being able to express themselves instead of, maybe creative writing or reading. And there was an immediate impact from the group. Really, they were really engaged with the storytelling. They were really engaged by Carol. And it just kind of had a kind of snowball effect, because it meant that because they were engaged with the storytelling after that visit with Carol, they involved the music department and some senior pupils. They also invited representatives from the Scottish Dolphin Centre to speak, and they brought lots of sensory items for the young people to explore. And it just allowed pupils to engage more with external visitors and opportunities to engage with learning in different ways. And there was a really, really nice quote from the LRC coordinator, which I'll read to you because it's not on the slide, but it's just really nice. And she said, "I think it's opened up the world for the pupils. They've all been allowed to shine in their own way." I know that sounds over the top, but really, they've had all their own space. They've flourished because of that. They've gotten what they need from every session. The core group of students has come on leaps and bounds since the start. For me, it has been the highlight of my career so far. Getting to try different things and involve different people in the school, it's gone so fast, but we will find a way to keep it going. So this is, yeah, again, it's just a really nice example of showing the impact of the residency and how, and a live literature experience, and how that can make such a difference for the young people. So again, this isn't, you know, trying to do it all. It's very specific. It's very focused on the context of their setting. But it doesn't need to try and be all singing and all dancing, actually. And thinking about the context of your school and the young people that you're working with, what would actually be most beneficial for them is always the best way to go. So just to quickly tie this up, some recommendations for your application if you are thinking about a live literature application. As we said, successful applications don't need to be focused on a particular author or have a detailed idea of the kind of project that you'd like to do. Instead, the main thing that we want to see is how the event will encourage a love of reading and writing in the young people that you work with. That's really the key thing that we want to see. We see a lot of applications, obviously, that focus on attainment or benchmarks and things like that, which are of course very important and we are not trying to distract from that, but we do know that successful applications are those ones that highlight the impact that the event will have and promote reading and writing for pleasure as well. Again, have a wee think about how you might work with other departments too. You know, we might want to work with your Sport for Learning department a little bit like Elgin High did, or St Ninians High working with the PE department, things like that. Just seeing where the links can be made is always really, really helpful. And yeah, so as always, these always link in with your Reading Schools action plan as well. So live literature applications are open at the moment. So if you're wanting to have a wee think, probably getting to the end of term now and you're thinking, you know what, don't want to start thinking about funding application at this point, that is okay. And the upcoming deadlines aren't until the 29th of August, and then there's another one on the 21st of November, but these are all for events running until March 2023. So you can have a wee think about when might suit you to apply, and then hopefully, yeah, you get a successful application and can run a lovely event. So finally, today we'd just like to talk to you quickly about the team prize. I know I'm running a wee bit over, so I'll try and go over this quickly. Should only take a few minutes. I'm sure a lot of you have been aware of the Scottish Teenage Book Prize and actually used it before. I know that Sheila in her breakout room was mentioning the team prize as well. So this is part of our work to engage teens specifically in reading, and it celebrates the very best of teen fiction in Scotland. And next year, quite excitingly, again, this is an exclusive sneak peek, there's all sneak peeks today, we're going to be going through a phase of consultation on the Scottish Teenage Book Prize to find out how to revamp the offer. And a big part of that will be asking you what you think. So any and all ideas, we'll be ready to take them in like sponges. So we'll have some time. Well, I'm saying we'll have some time at the end today. You might have to finish up shortly, but this will be part of a kind of wider piece of work to get feedback on what our teen offer looks like. So it's not even just specifically on the teen prize. It's basically all of the work that we're doing to support teens. We want to kind of try and revamp and what that could look like in the future. So originally the teen prize would involve, it would be 3 of the best new books from Scottish authors and publishers. This year we had quite a variety of titles on the shortlist on the slide there. And teenagers throughout Scotland read all 3 books on the shortlist and then they decide the winner by voting for their favourite. So that's kind of the model that's always operated on. And we've always worked with authors to kind of show them reading their books, doing kind of exclusive Q&A content, activity suggestions for voting, things like that. So that's kind of been the way it's run up till now. But the main thing with this is that the winner is solely determined by the young people's votes. So as we said, they're encouraged to read all 3 of the books, discuss their favourite, and then vote for the all-important winner. But lots of young people take part as a group, which is kind of organised through yourselves or through the school library. But we're keen to involve more teens in our offer that maybe wouldn't usually read all 3 books. We know it's quite difficult to read all 3 books. We know it's quite difficult to source the 3 books as well. And they might not attend a book club. So we'd prefer to try and open it up to all teens who maybe wouldn't read all 3 books, who maybe wouldn't attend a book club, but maybe would want to do something a bit more creative to their response to the teen prize. So as mentioned, this year we're hoping to revamp the offer for teens so it reflects what young people you work with need to engage with reading. Because we know as well, you're the experts, you know the challenges in your settings of trying to engage with teenagers. We know it's tough, but we know that there's probably different ways that we could go about it. So, and this will in turn, of course, support both opportunities to read for pleasure as well as the knowledge of contemporary children's literature, which we're talking about for staff, for social networks, the opportunity to respond to what they're reading creatively. These all link to the Reading Schools framework. So hopefully it'll be a kind of double barrel, a kind of win-win situation. So one of the ideas that we've been kind of discussing internally, but very much this is at the very, very start of what we've been looking at, is we're hoping to explore removing the voting element to the prize, and actually instead of having a short list of 3 titles which pupils would have to read, having a short list with more titles, so maybe expanding it to 6 or 8 titles. And instead of expecting pupils to read all of the books, they can just pick a book that they maybe want to read, or they might maybe like the look of, or they maybe wouldn't have picked up, and then they can read it, or they can kind of respond to it creatively how they so wish. So this would mean it's much more kind of focused, pupil voice focus, and nurtures a space for learner-led creative responses in a more inclusive way as well. So those pupils are maybe ones who wouldn't come along to a book club and maybe come to your school library for other reasons. They can still get involved, and in turn it'll help you to hopefully engage with more pupils in the school library. Thinking about the response to Heartstopper, for instance, recently, it's just been massive, and I know that that's been a way-in for a lot of teens to engage with reading for the first time as a result of the Netflix series. So that's where we're kind of thinking along the lines of those pupils that maybe wouldn't come automatically to join a book club or to read the books, but actually can they respond to it in a creative way. So the shortlist would of course still spotlight great Scottish teen and YA fiction, but ultimately it would help to bring together communities of teenagers to read together and discuss books in a less prescriptive way. So again, this is very much just an initial thought that we've been having internally, but as I say, the next year will be very much a period of consultation that we'd love to get your ideas and talk to you about and see what you think would work too. So we have got a Jamboard link, I think. Catherine's maybe already popped it in the chat. So I realise we've run over a little bit, so we might not have time to pop in anything at the moment, but what we could do is share that with you afterwards. And if you do have any ideas for what you'd like the teen prize to look like, or what you'd like our teen offer to look like more broadly, you can let us know afterwards. And you can also email us directly too if you've got if anything comes to your comes to mind, then please do just let us know. Basically what we want to know is what would work for teens in your setting. So think about in your school, what kind of teen offer would work quite well. It doesn't need to be, it can be totally different to this as well. Whatever you think we could be doing that would be beneficial. What offer would you like to see from us for teens as well? Obviously we've run the teen prize for a number of years now. We've obviously got opportunities for teenagers through our writing team as well with StoryCon. Again, these are all things that we can look at, and if we're not doing something that you think would be useful, this is the opportunity to feed in. And what would support your work with teens as well? Obviously we want to be able to help you. Again, we know how difficult teenagers can be sometimes to kind of get them on board. So if there's something that we could be doing to support you through this offer, then please do pop down any ideas too. So Catherine, I think, very kindly popped in the chat. Thank you, Catherine. So yeah, you can go into the Jamboard just now, pop in any ideas that you might have. We're always very, very grateful for your ideas. But as I say, you can also follow us up by email, or if you have any ideas just now, you can unmute and we'll be more than happy to chat. But yeah, what I'll do is I'll just pop our email addresses on the slide there, so that if you do want to get in touch with us, you can, because I am conscious I've run over a little bit. So if you do need to shoot off, thank you so much for listening, and hopefully it was useful. You can also get in touch with us about anything, not just about the teen offer stuff, if there is anything you want to ask about Reading Schools. But also we're more than happy to take questions just now as well.
If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or into the Jamboard, or email Catherine or Rachel. Thank you so much, Rachel and Catherine. That was brilliant. What a quick hour. I know we're all been really keen to hear more about Reading Schools. I want one of those wooden blocks, and I'm definitely going to use the hokey cokey to describe Reading Schools to our management team. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. And all of you, thank you so much for coming. Hope you enjoyed it and you can take some ideas away with you. I've got pages and pages of scribbles here that I've written down today. Please leave feedback if you can. It's really important to help us know what you want, and Scottish Book Trust as well. I'm excited to hear about the Scottish Teenage Book Prize plans. That all sounds really fabulous. And author visits, yeah, we've all come away with tons of ideas to keep us going and to get us going on our reading school accreditation journeys. It's all very exciting. Have a great summer, everybody, whatever you're doing. And we hope to see you all in the autumn term, and always get in touch if there's anything we can do to help you. Thank you for coming.